So the first step in making your Game Master rage quit is... What's that? Really? Are you going to try to convince me that's not how players win at Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Next you're going to tell me that the Game Master video shouldn't start with the letters TPK. Let me see that script. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Teamwork, valuing others, being thoughtful, showing patience? Do you even know how the internet works? Fine, I'll give it a shot. Today, I want to talk about a couple of mindsets that I think really get at the heart of Pathfinder 2e and help you have some fun at the gaming table on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I'm the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I am a storyteller that is excited to try out some really weird builds. I'm not apologizing. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to a discussion of how to have fun in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, or more particularly, a couple of mindsets that I think really get at the heart of this game, and should you embrace these mindsets, I think they will go a long way in helping you really get the most out of your gaming experience. Earlier this year, when I fell and broke my wrist, I was in a situation where I wasn't able to edit videos, and I had to come up with scripts that I could do in a single take that didn't require a lot of editing in order to put up on YouTube. And one of the video series that I came up with during that time was a series that I called How to Have Fun With. And essentially it was an exploration of the classes in Pathfinder 2e that looked at the classes through a simple lens: what makes this class fun? I actually had a lot of good responses to those videos, and don't worry, I intend to return to that series. But one of the things that struck me recently is I can talk about having fun in more than just the context of individual classes in Pathfinder 2e. I thought it's worth taking some time to discuss how to have fun with Pathfinder 2e as a system as a whole, and that is the goal with this video. Now, one thing that I'm trying to do a better job of here on this channel is putting the important information up front in the video so that you can get the key takeaways immediately. And then if you want to dive deeper into the subject, you can watch the video or use the timestamps below in order to dive into specific points where you would like some more information. When it comes to Pathfinder 2e, I think that there are a couple of game design choices that Paizo made that, if you embrace these concepts philosophically, lead to a better experience in playing Pathfinder 2e. Those two concepts are valuing teamwork and embracing complexity. If you approach the game with both of these in mind, I think that it leads to a much more positive gaming experience. Valuing teamwork means looking at building your character and playing this game in such a way that you're not just evaluating what you want, but you're also evaluating how can you contribute to the team as a whole, and how can you work with others in order to get the most out of your character. Then, on the embracing complexity side of things, Paizo made the deliberate choice to make a more complex TTRPG. We'll talk about how that's a little bit of a double-edged sword. There's pros and cons to that, but I think that it's just wise to embrace the fact that this is a complex game and approach the game with that in mind and look for ways to embrace the complexity to really get the benefits out of that. And I'll go ahead and tell you the big takeaway on that point is going to involve the fact that retraining rules are core. That's something I emphasize a lot on this channel, and we're going to be talking about that again today. So again, the core takeaways of this video: if you want to get the most out of Pathfinder 2e, learn to value teamwork, learn to embrace complexity, do the things that help you to get the most out of those mindsets, and I think you will have a much better experience at your Pathfinder 2e gaming table. Again, timestamps are down below for some more detailed portions of this conversation, so if you want to jump around and see particular topics, you can definitely do that. And of course, another way that you can benefit from this conversation is by joining this conversation. So if you have some advice on how to get the most out of Pathfinder 2e, be sure to share that in the comments section below, because I would love to hear your thoughts on this subject as well. But with all that out of the way, let's get started. So as I mentioned earlier, the premise for this video stems directly from the earlier videos that I started talking about how to have fun with specific classes. Essentially, I wanted to look at classes and ask, what do these classes bring to the table? What makes them interesting, engaging, and fun? How can you use this class to have a good time? As I've noted, I do intend to return to those discussions. I've got some ideas of more that I can do with that series now that my arm has healed and I'm back to my regular video production habits. But in this video, I kind of want to take a step back and look at the big picture of Pathfinder 2e as a whole and talk about what can you do to get the most out of Pathfinder 2e at your gaming table. Now, I want to go ahead and acknowledge up front that this is a conversation where you do have to be a little bit careful how you approach it. The goal in this video is not to be the fun police and tell you, oh, you're playing this game wrong. That's not the idea. At the end of the day, if you're having fun playing a game and if your friends are having fun with you around the table, you're doing it right. You don't need me or my permission to play a game the way you want to play a game. So if you're having fun, have at it. Truly, the ultimate arbiter of whether or not you're having fun is you yourself, and I don't have the capacity to tell you how it should be done. That being said, as someone who has played a number of different TTRPGs, and as someone who enjoys a number of different TTRPGs, one thing that I think is worth bearing in mind is every game is designed differently, every game developer makes different choices, and if you choose to approach a given game, approaching the game with what is essentially a similar mindset to what the developer intended, I think that leads to, well, a better experience. For example, I enjoy playing Call of Cthulhu. Me and my friends love to do a New Year's Call of Cthulhu game every year. It's a pretty big tradition for us, and I have a lot of fun with that system. But if you've ever played Call of Cthulhu, you probably know that, well, Call of Cthulhu has some pretty significant differences in its baseline assumptions, and if you're approaching Call of Cthulhu as if it was a typical fantasy TTRPG like Pathfinder, if you go into Call of Cthulhu hoping to get the Pathfinder experience, you're probably not going to have a good time. That's not the kind of stories that Call of Cthulhu intends to tell, and that is true for pretty much every TTRPG out there. Every game has a particular kind of story that it's trying to tell. It has a particular take on storytelling and on the mechanics to support storytelling. And I think if you really want to get the most out of any game, taking the time to embrace the game for what it is or what it's trying to be is going to help you get the most out of that product. It's going to be true for Shadowrun, it's going to be true for anything White Wolf publishes, it's going to be true for Dungeons & Dragons, for Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu. I don't care what game you're talking about. I think that's a fairly reasonable piece of advice and a good place to start this conversation. So, with that in mind, what are some of the assumptions, what are some of the developmental ideas that Paizo went with in creating Pathfinder 2e, and what can we do as game masters or players to embrace those assumptions and really bring them to the forefront of our Pathfinder gaming experience? Now, honestly, I think there's a lot of stuff you could talk about here, and this video is probably just kind of scratching the surface of this topic, but I want to talk about two things in particular that Paizo has done with Pathfinder 2nd Edition, two particular assumptions, and how I think you can use those assumptions to get the most out of this game. As stated before, Paizo developed this game with teamwork in mind, and Paizo deliberately created a complex game. So I think if you want to get the most out of Pathfinder 2e, it's worth valuing teamwork and embracing complexity, and I want to talk about how to do those at the gaming table. So up first, let's talk about valuing teamwork. Paizo has built into a lot of the mechanical assumptions of Pathfinder 2e and how this game works a bias towards teamwork. Now, honestly, this should not be a surprise. Tabletop RPGs are inherently a team-based activity. You and your friends are sitting down and creating a story together. As the old joke goes, a solo TTRPG is basically just writing a book. If you want to have the actual TTRPG experience, you kind of have to have a teamwork mentality in mind from the very word go. But that being said, different TTRPGs weigh the idea of teamwork differently. Some games will lean very heavily into teamwork mechanics, some games don't particularly care about teamwork mechanics, and Pathfinder 2nd Edition probably exists somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. Paizo didn't design this game with specific hardcore character roles that you have to fill and you can't ever step outside of that role. Paizo didn't design this game where you have to check a certain list of boxes in order to effectively create a party for your Pathfinder game, but the mechanics behind Pathfinder 2e and the mathematical assumptions of Pathfinder 2e really operate under the assumption that you are working with the other players at the table in order to pursue your goals and achieve success. One piece of advice I commonly give game masters on this channel: when you are planning encounters as a game master, one on-level creature is assumed to be a moderate encounter for 2-player characters, and that math holds pretty tight across this system. The math in Pathfinder 2e is pretty stable if you understand how it works, but think about that for a second. One on-level monster is a moderate encounter for 2-player characters. That's how the math is intended to work. So you can kind of see right from the word go, in the way that Paizo designs its encounter building, that there is a sort of baseline assumption: if you are doing on-level stuff for your character, you are doing that on-level stuff with somebody else at your side. The mathematics of the game assume that teamwork is going to be the normal operating procedures for your table. So while there aren't explicit, you have to check this box and that box in order to build a team in Pathfinder 2e, there is a lot of mechanical benefit and a lot of mechanical weight behind the idea of teamwork, and Paizo has developed a system where players who are working in concert with one another can do a lot more than the same players each working individually. Now, there is an entire genre of advice that can go into this discussion of valuing teamwork that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on in this video. I'm a big fan of Seth Skorkowski, and I frequently recommend his video on the RPG social contract, and let's just go ahead and admit I'm doing it again here. This is really just another attempt in my long-running scheme to one day get to meet and play a game with Seth Skorkowski. Please, man, I would love to game with you. But any of the advice that might fall under that general heading of the RPG social contract, anything that falls under the general idea of just being a good person at the table and being mindful of others at the table, all of that immediately plays into this idea of teamwork. And if you want to have a good experience in Pathfinder 2e, that's definitely a healthy place to start. come to the game, approach the game with teamwork in mind. You are working with the other players. You are here to accomplish a goal together as a group. I think having that mentality from the word go is setting your group up for success in the way that a more solo glory style mentality just isn't going to manage in Pathfinder 2e. So let's go ahead and talk about, in Pathfinder 2e, this game really does not assume that your character is going to achieve a lot of their success or a lot of their glory, if you will, in solo antics. Don't get me wrong, you can still split the party from time to time. In my most recent Pathfinder game, all 5 of my players ended up in a completely different part of town, all doing completely different things, but they were still working together to pursue the same goal. There are still times where your character can run off and do their own thing. It's not like it's impossible to have some fun solo moments in Pathfinder 2e, but just be aware that especially when it comes to things like the combat mechanics and the way that threats are evaluated in the system, the game assumes you're going to be working with other players, and if you have this mentality of just like solo glory, I can do it all myself, you're probably going to walk away feeling very ineffective. And while I realize the idea of being a glory hog versus being a team player seems like very, very simple advice, there is a little bit of a deeper truth behind this. Having fun in any game is at least partially correlated to the idea of feeling effective. If you don't feel like you're effective, you're not going to have as much fun, and if you don't feel effective over several games in a row, you're probably going to walk away feeling like Pathfinder 2e just isn't that good of a game. Well, if you're the kind of player who tends to that solo glory hound, charge off on my own playstyle, because the mechanics of the game don't really reward that playstyle, you're probably going to encounter frustrating situations over and over and over again, and you're not really going to see what Pathfinder 2e really has to offer. The game assumes you are working with other players, and if you take that assumption and run with it, you're more likely to feel like you're effective in the game. If you feel like you're effective, you're probably going to achieve system mastery a little quicker, and you're probably going to see some of the bright spots of this system a lot more clearly. So, don't expect to be a solo glory hound in Pathfinder 2e, but instead what you should do is, at least partially, build with the team in mind. When you're creating your character, when you are driving your character through the campaign world, think about the other players on your team and how you can work with them to achieve your goals. Now again, there is a lot that can go into this conversation. The simple idea of building your character alongside someone else and thinking how your character can relate to another character, that is some pretty powerful content. I haven't played the game Traveler, but it's actually a system that I would like to try at some point, in part because one of the mechanics of the game revolves around building characters that have a specific connection to other members of the group before the game even begins. Pathfinder 2e doesn't use a mechanic like that, but I would actually kind of be curious to see how it would affect gameplay if Pathfinder 2e did. It sounds pretty engaging to me, and as I've said, this is a game that considers teamwork to be a default assumption, but stepping away from Traveler and the mechanics they use, when you are building your character, when you are developing your character, take a moment and just ask yourself, what can I do to build this character in such a way that it supports other characters at the gaming table? There are a myriad of different ways that you can do this, but essentially it boils down to just when you're making selections for your character, when you're picking out options, look for options that could stack well or pair well with what somebody else is doing, and the odds of you getting a lot more out of the character are going to naturally increase as a result. So, for example, if you know that one of the other players at the table loves to play wizards who love to chuck fireballs all over the map, looking into options that improve your character's resistance to fire damage so it's a little bit easier for the other player to make use of the fireball spell. That is a quick small step that allows you to build with other players in mind, and Pathfinder 2e has a ton of options. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. Finding small ways that you can work in concert with the other players at the table, these things are going to naturally increase your effectiveness, and as a result, I think they're going to give you a better experience with the system. Still, all of this conversation so far is a little bit vague. There's so many different options, there's so many different ways you could go with this. What's something practical that you can do to really begin to value teamwork at your gaming table? Now, this is not the only thing you can do, but I think this is a good place that you can start. Make a deliberate habit, once per combat, make it a point to deliberately use your third action to help an ally in one fashion or another. Use the aid action or use some other option that your character has to improve what somebody else can do. Just make that a standard habit for yourself at the gaming table. Once per combat, look for the opportunity, take advantage of the opportunity, and see what that does to your enjoyment of the game. As you get more proficient in supporting the other players at the table, and as the other players at the table get more proficient in supporting you, you're going to see the overall effectiveness of your group rise, and you're going to see a lot of the more entertaining moments in Pathfinder 2e coming to the forefront, because essentially you're playing into one of the baseline assumptions of the game. Paizo designed a game that values teamwork. So, if you take the time to play the game with teamwork in mind, you're going to get a lot more out of the experience. The other topic I want to talk about today is embracing complexity, and this comes from what is probably one of the most common criticisms of Pathfinder, but is also probably one of the best things about Pathfinder. Pathfinder is a complex game. Paizo made the choice when they developed this game to develop a very complex offering. Now, I will say, Pathfinder 2e is not as complex as some of the other games out there, including Pathfinder 1e. Okay? If you've played Pathfinder 1e, calling Pathfinder 2e complex is a little bit humorous. But still, it stands to note that compared to some of the other TTRPGs on the market, and the obvious example here would be D&D 5e, Paizo is a more complex offering, and Paizo made the choice to do that deliberately. Now, complexity is a double-edged sword. Some people really enjoy complexity, some people are put off by complexity, and I think that's perfectly normal. I can understand how someone looking at Pathfinder 2e for the first time and the incredible array of options that comes with Pathfinder 2e, I can understand how someone looking at this game could go, that's a lot. Mastering Pathfinder 2e means being able to take in a lot of different content and being able to properly relate a lot of different content back and forth with itself. There's a lot to this game. But by the same token, there is some pretty strong positives to having a complex system, not the least of which is a complex system can support more complex storytelling and more complex characters. This is a little bit of an oversimplification, but one of the reasons that I don't play a lot of D&D 5e is I think they overuse advantage and disadvantage in that system. Advantage and disadvantage is a system that is very accessible, it's very easy to understand. There is a lot of good game design behind advantage and disadvantage, and I can see why D&D leans on that system as much as they do, but one of my criticisms of D&D 5e is advantage and disadvantage covers so many different things and so many different circumstances that you have an incredible number of story beats that are all mechanically identical. It's been a while since I've researched into it, but I think there are over 60 different mechanical things in D&D 5e that can give either advantage or disadvantage. And that means that there are a lot of different story beats that look identical at the gaming table. Now, Pathfinder 2e has a mechanic that is very similar to advantage and disadvantage. It's called fortune and misfortune, and they are mechanically, in most instances, identical to one another. There's a little bit of nuance in Pathfinder 2e, I'm sure that doesn't surprise you, but as a general rule, Pathfinder uses a mechanic called fortune and misfortune, and it plays almost identical to advantage and disadvantage in D&D 5e. However, as a conscious design choice from Paizo, fortune and misfortune, you can hear it in the name, these are mechanics that are meant to portray the concept of luck. Narratively, in Pathfinder 2e, when you see an advantage or disadvantage mechanic, you automatically know that there is some kind of luck-based shenanigans going on. That is precisely the kind of story beat that Paizo is trying to give you. Paizo has a number of different mechanical options that can give advantages, not advantage or disadvantage, but just advantages to a player at the table. There's a lot of different ways that your character can improve and be stronger and gain some kind of benefit in combat that's not just roll 2 dice and take the better one. And each of those different mechanical options is designed to support different narrative beats inside of the game. The complexity of Pathfinder 2e comes with a bit of a learning curve, but it also comes with the ability to support more complex narratives inside of the game, so there are definitely some pros and cons to the complexity that's found in Pathfinder 2e. All of that leads back to the simple statement: if I'm going to play Pathfinder 2e, I should embrace the complexity. I should say up front, I know this game is a little more complex, I know the rules are going to take a little bit longer to learn, I know that there's some more detail that I have to keep in mind, but if I'm willing to do those things, there's a lot to gain from this system. Embracing the complexity is essentially choosing to focus on the strengths that come from Paizo's choice to make a more complex game. So, how do you embrace complexity, and how do you approach a more mechanically dense system in a way that's going to be fun at the gaming table? Well, again, there is a lot of advice that is generally applicable across a lot of games that I think is useful here just right up front. One key thing to remember is start slow. Every game has its complex ideas, every game has its difficult things to learn, and it is very unlikely that you are going to master any game in a short period of time. Every game has a learning curve, and just accepting that from the word go, you're going to need to take your time to get used to a game, I think that goes a long way in helping you enjoy the experience. It's going to take me a bit, I know that, but I'm willing to do that. Now, with any TTRPG, there are going to be different ways that you can slowly work your way into a game or into a system. Pathfinder 2e has a product called the Beginner Box that is very well received in the gaming community. I personally do not use the Beginner Box at my table. I have used it with some of my Pathfinder clubs at my high school, but I haven't used it for my home games. But I can say that the Pathfinder 2e Beginner Box is a very solid product and is a great way for learning some of the fundamentals of how Pathfinder 2e works. And if you are brand new to this system, that is a fantastic place to start. But whether you start with the Beginner Box or with the game as a whole, start slow. Take your time. You don't have to dive into the deep end of the system and try to create a changeling Leshy with the ghost archetype thaumaturge using the rare noble background as your first character. Yes, that's a completely legitimate option, but you don't have to do something crazy like that. You can start with a simpler character, you can start with something that's a little bit easier to approach, and slowly work your way into the more complex aspects of the game. Now, if you are not sure where you want to start in Pathfinder 2e, I frequently recommend the Rogue as a fantastic beginner's class. They are going to be proficient with all martial weapons. They have a healthy array of subclasses that allow you to approach the game in a few different styles, and every one of those styles has a very clear kind of intended play path. So if you're playing the brutish bandit who uses strength to try to overwhelm his foes, or if you're playing the sneaky thief who's trying to maneuver to the ideal location, there are a few different ways to play the rogue, but in every instance, your subclass is going to tell you exactly what you're going for, and in general, I find the rogue to be just a very approachable class in this game. I think it is a fantastic place for new players to start if they don't know where they want to start. There are obviously many other great classes. Ranger comes to mind, Fighter comes to mind. There are definitely a few different things that you can do to slowly work your way into this game and adjust to how it plays. When you are learning this game, one thing that I recommend is that you focus on learning a few details at a time. There are a lot of particular things in Pathfinder 2e. This game is driven very heavily by its traits system, and learning what different traits means is one of the things that really drives your mastery of this game. Looking at all of the traits that are out there can feel very overwhelming. But the good news is you don't have to learn them all at once. You can take your time and focus on a few traits that are important to your character, get the hang of those things, and then as you go, expand to other ideas that you encounter inside the game. Now, I know that sounds like a pretty simple description, but there's a very obvious question that comes with that. Out of the incredible array of traits that drive Pathfinder 2e, which ones should I focus on first? Well, Paizo does a really good job in their character classes of giving you a key terms sidebar that really highlights the important traits to your character. So, for example, the Fighter class key terms sidebar highlights the traits Flourish, Press, and Stance. So, if you were playing a fighter, those would be the first three key terms I would encourage you to learn and really try to understand at the gaming table. If you're playing a fighter and you know how Flourish, Press, and Stance affect your actions, well, you understand a lot of how your class operates and what you're trying to do at the gaming table. Looking past that, you want to take the time to learn core class abilities or key class features, things like that, but again, as long as you're focusing on the things that Paizo highlights as central to the character class you're playing, the odds are you can get those ideas down pretty easily, and once you know how to use those things effectively in the game, then you can start to explore other ideas and other concepts as they begin to show up at your gaming table. This leads very naturally to my next point, and this is where embracing complexity really starts to pay off in Pathfinder 2e. That is, trying new stuff. Paizo has a lot of stuff. When you look at the character options in this game, Paizo there is a wealth of things that you can do. Way back when Pathfinder 2e first launched, back before the remaster, there was an old video where one guy took the time to calculate how many unique characters you could actually create using the Ancestry background class ABCs of Pathfinder 2e. And they went through, looked at all the unique options under just those three choices, and they ended up calculating that there were more unique Pathfinder 2e characters in the base version of this game than there are unique individuals on the face of planet Earth. Pathfinder 2e has a lot of stuff that you can try, and one of the cool things about all of this stuff that you can try is because Paizo has done the work with the math behind the screen, the vast majority of this stuff works. This is one of those points where you could get into some nitpicky debates, but just to give you an example, a lot of people accuse Pathfinder 2e of leaving spellcasters underpowered in this system. And I personally, on this channel, have complained that the remaster wizard isn't quite as good as I would like it to be. So, Pathfinder 2e, there's a lot of complaints about spellcasters in general. I personally could tell you that Pathfinder wizards sit in a place that I'm not fully comfortable with, and yet, in one of my friend's current Pathfinder 2e games, I have been playing a melee-focused wizard. I'm not joking about this. I've been playing an orc wizard that gets up close and personal with a lot of the enemies that we fight, and do you want to know what the strange thing is? It works! Now, I've got some pretty good system mastery under my belt. I wouldn't recommend that as a beginner character, but I've been able to run a pretty crazy and complex build pretty effectively, and I've had a lot of fun trying it out, and I say that fully acknowledging that I am using a build that I consider to be a bit undertuned as far as the system goes. Paizo has an incredible wealth of character options, and for the most part, those options, once you have some system mastery to let you approach them, most options are going to be reasonably effective. So, while you're not going to learn Pathfinder 2e in a day, it's going to take some time and it's going to take some experience to get used to this game. As you get more and more comfortable, expand your horizons. Try out new classes, new spells, new items. Try out new options inside of the game, and have fun exploring all of the fun, cool, crazy stuff that Paizo comes up with. One of the true strengths of a complex game is just the incredible variety of offerings that the game company gives you. Explore that. Exploring the complexity of Pathfinder 2e is going to help you discover many of the wonderful moments that this game has to offer. Of course, there is a very natural question that comes from this. How can I explore a game if I'm playing the same character? And that's pretty fair. While you might be able to explore options like trying out new magic items or different things like that in the system, for a lot of games, exploring the content available is difficult because, well, a lot of the aspects of your character are locked in, and there's not a lot you can do to really step outside the choices that you've made. But one of the things that Paizo has done is they have made retraining a core element of Pathfinder 2e. I think this was a stroke of genius on the part of Paizo. If you're going to create a game that has a wild diversity of options, you need to put tools in place that let players explore that wild diversity of options, and that is exactly what retraining is. Now, there's going to be some variability to what you can do with retraining, and there's going to be some subject to GM fiat behind the discussion of retraining, but at the very basic level, retraining operates under the assumption that the majority of your class feats and skill feats can be retrained with a little bit of time and possibly money invested. So if you're playing a fighter and you're running around doing the whole sword and board routine, getting a lot out of shield block, and enjoying engaging in daring combat with your foes, if you're having some fun with that sword and board routine, but then your game master drops an incredible huge two-handed greatsword in the loot, you don't have to sell that greatsword. Spend a little bit of downtime, retrain a few of your fighter class feats, and suddenly you can let out a vicious swing that really takes advantage of everything that that sweet greatsword you just found has to offer. Paizo intends for you to be able to switch out options in the system fairly reasonably, fairly often, with a great deal of flexibility, and the reason they do that is to give you the opportunity to explore this game. Now, obviously there's different areas of this game where what you can retrain or how often you can retrain is going to be subject to GM interpretation. So, for example, can my character retrain their ancestry feats? Some GMs may let you, some GMs may not. But as a general assumption in this game, retraining is core and it's something that is intended to be used. And if you really want to embrace the complexity of what Paizo has brought to the table with this game, retraining is the #1 tool to let you do so. Just because you're playing a specific ancestry, just because you're playing a specific class, that doesn't mean that you're locked into only one set of options, and once you pick a particular option, you can never do anything else. Paizo has designed this game where you can really explore what is available. So that is a big picture look at two core assumptions of Pathfinder 2e. Teamwork is essential to this game, complexity is essential to this game, and embracing those two ideas, I think if you do that deliberately, you're going to get at the heart of this game quicker and really begin to enjoy what this game has to offer a little more directly. But the time has come for me to turn the conversation over to you. What do you think about Pathfinder 2e and what players can do to really have some fun with this system? What are the selling points of this game, and what does Pathfinder 2e have to offer that can help somebody have a lot of fun at the gaming table? Do you agree that embracing teamwork and complexity are strategies that you can use to have a lot of fun at the gaming table? Or are there other concepts that you think really sell what this game has to offer? Jump down to the comments section, let me know your thoughts on this, and share your advice for getting the most out of Pathfinder 2e. While you're doing that, don't forget all of the stuff that helps to support this channel. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon. All of those links will be in the video description below. But, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.